What's up, everybody? And today we're checking out how the U.S. Infantry almost switched to the XM-8 rifle. I don't know much about this rifle, so we're going to learn all about it. This is by the legendary Task and Purpose. You know how much we love this channel, Task and Purpose. They're absolutely fantastic. And if you're not already subscribed to their channel, then what are you doing? There'll be a link down below in the description, as there always is. Please go over to their channel and give it a like, subscribe. This is interesting because obviously I did the video yesterday about the new rifle that the US is getting, and so it's going to be interesting to watch this on what was gonna happen. Just looking at the image of it, it looks like something out of Halo, so this is going to be super interesting. What else? Also, I am going to react to another one by Garand Thumb. Is it Garand or Gerand? I don't know. And it's the one about the SA-8 or the L85A1. And I will watch that one, and it will be out tomorrow. So if you're not already, like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you can know when that goes live. Only one video today and one video tomorrow because I couldn't record yesterday. So, yeah, lacking in the video department. I usually put 2 videos up a day, but I'm only doing one today, one tomorrow. Just bear with me with that. But the longer videos, so maybe this is a good thing. Maybe we can have these longer video formats and enjoy them and talk more. Have I got anything to say before we get started? Don't forget to check out all the links down below, including the original video, and all the equipment I use is all linked down below. If you go through them links and buy something, even if you don't buy what is on the link, if you go through them links and buy something else, the channel gets a commission and it helps support the channel. So do that if you can. I think that's it. Let's shut up, let's watch this, and let's learn about this weird sci-fi Halo-looking gun.
This is the legendary XM-8 rifle. It fires 5.56 at a rate of 750 rounds per minute. In the early 2000s, the XM-8 was actually on the verge of replacing the aging M4 series as the US Army's primary infantry rifle. What followed was a story filled with drama, intrigue, and even accusations that it wasted millions of taxpayer dollars. The beautiful XM-8's development story was an absolute nightmare.
Let's just have a look at it real quick. The smallest Picatinny rail up front. Do you know what? It kind of looks like an upgraded version of the SA-80, right? You've got the handle, you've got this weird like plastic front part. Do you know what I mean? It almost looks kind of like a futuristic SA-80 in a way, doesn't it? Do you agree on that? Shoots 5.56 NATO rounds. Obviously, that got changed. Interesting.
But if it was never adopted, why is it still an iconic weapon? Why is it still a household name? You're about to hear the story of one of the most ambitious firearms programs and how its failure helped pave the way for the next generation of weapons today. Huge thank you to Greg from the Spartan 117 GW YouTube channel for making this happen. The saga of the XM-8 started.
Don't forget to go over to their channel, please, because their videos are phenomenal. They're really good.
In 2002, just 1 year after the war in Afghanistan had kicked off. Some lower enlisted grunts were complaining about their M4s, claiming that they were malfunctioning and jamming constantly.
This is, I feel, like a normal thing. You go into a different terrain with a weapon, and I think that you're certainly going to come up to new obstacles with that weapon and learning how to clean it and stuff. But obviously that was adapted and looked after and figured out in the long haul. The
Army Vice Chief of Staff, General Jack Keane, was outraged when he heard this. He turned to a brand new organization in the Army called PEO Soldier, led by Colonel Moran, to finally replace the M4. PEO Soldier is the agency responsible for prototyping everything a soldier wears or carries to this day. This new agency had one very special power. They had the authority to ignore much of the government red tape and go around slow-moving bureaucracy.
Interesting.
The goal was to replace the M4 within 3 years instead of the normal 10 that it would take.
Well, I feel like the speeding up of the process was probably more because they were actually in Afghanistan right now and it needed fixing ASAP. So if you're like in a war zone and you've got 10 years before something gets replaced, you're going to be like, no, we need it done ASAP. Like, I do get that side of it.
These guys wanted to speed run weapons development. Colonel Moran immediately set out to find a loophole, something that would ultimately doom the XM-8 rifle, as we'll see. The first thing you normally need when trying to create a new firearm in the military is something called an operational requirement document. These are written by the Infantry Center. Who knew the infantry knows how to write? This would define the XM-8 rifles.
They got the qualifications to do that? I don't know if they do. Is this like the whole monkey typewriter thing where you get like, if you had an infinite amount of monkeys, and they're all just randomly typing on a typewriter, one of them will eventually write a Shakespeare play. Is this the same thing? You get an infinite amount of infantrymen typing, and eventually you're going to get one of these documents.
Necessary firepower, magazine size, rate of fire, weight, all of its capabilities. But there was a problem. It normally took years and a multi-step approval process to get a new one of these authorized. Now, if you think that sounds boring and bureaucratic, so too did Colonel Moran. So instead, he dug up an old, previously approved operational requirement from almost 10 years earlier, from the 1994 Objective Individual Combat Weapon Program. What was that? But before we get into that, the only way I was able to have the opportunity to get on a plane, go to Arizona, and try out the XM-8 myself is thanks to this episode's sponsor. Getting into car accidents is awful.
Okay, I'm going to skip the sponsor. I know that some people aren't keen when people do that, but I am going to skip the sponsor, okay, guys?
Rifle with a 20mm programmable airburst grenade slapped onto the top of it to enhance the Army's favorite buzzword, lethality. Sounds like something that could be useful, right? So why did it end up stalling? The weapon's grenades weren't powerful enough. It weighed a ton at 17.6 pounds, which is more than an M249. And future versions of it malfunctioned during training, injuring a soldier. All that is to say, the OICW program
So basically, it was an absolute shit show.
Was a dead end.
Yeah.
But this is where they found their loophole. Colonel Moran and the Army brass split the project into two separate halves, with Increment 1 being the XM-8 and Increment 2 being the airburst grenade launcher.
Interesting.
This way, he could attempt to replace the M4 without getting that new operational requirement document approved.
Interesting. I see what they've done there. They are just trying to find back ways of getting this done. But even though you do need a weapon to work in a war zone that you're in right now, especially if it's like, this isn't working, we've just gone to this new country where we're at war, we need it to work ASAP. 10 years is a long time. We can all agree on that. But there's a reason it takes that long. The amount of testing this equipment needs, not to mention, I'm just talking about like the small bits of equipment. If you're replacing the rifle of a standard infantryman, like think about how much testing that needs. That's a crazy amount.
This is what I like to call malicious compliance. The officers at PEO Soldier were bureaucratic acrobats, dodging regulations and compliance left and right. This way, Moran was able to invest $33 million into the XM-8. The German company H&K chose to repackage their G36, which was the German infantry's standard rifle. This would serve as the base for the weapon in order to deliver on the promise of a speedy development process.
But behind the scenes during that time, obviously the G36 had already been around, and the U.S. Army was starting to look and put the feelers out for like a new gun. You know, H&K was working with them, and they're like, hey, we can basically make some changes to the G36 that would kind of suit like what the Americans want.
Now, fancy marketing for the rifle was used to...
It looks sci-fi-esque, but if you think about a modern rifle now, like the amount of universal components that they need to fit certain scopes on and different all sorts of different stuff. Like, it's just not built for modification, is it? That's what it is. It's just not, it's kind of like what the SA-80 was until they upgraded parts of it.
Keep public interest high and ensure a big army would actually follow up on adopting it. The XM-8 developers were actually told by US Army officers to make its aesthetics look futuristic and sexy. They wanted it to look like something out of the movie Starship Troopers.
No.
So HK got in touch with the...
I feel like that goes even more with Helldivers 2 spreading democracy. Helldivers 2 is already a massive pun on America, isn't it? Let's be honest. So they're turning around and being like, we want the weapon to look like Starship Troopers. Just makes it even more of a pun, doesn't it? Oh my God.
Folks over at Odehoven Design Studio to help. These are the same people who helped design cars for Audi, who would now come in and spruce up the rifle concept.
No.
This is the final design they came up with. Its eye-catching unique silhouette was why every video game in the mid-2000s had them.
I mean, this famous gun, it's been in like every video game that you can think of, Ghost Recon, Battlefield, Call of Duty. It's a very iconic prototype weapon.
Video games gave the XM-8 higher accuracy and damage than the M4, which only made the public love it even more, I think. It even spawned a meme that the weapon looked like a fish.
It does kind of look like a
delivered
fish.
the XM-8 to the Army insanely fast, within just 120 days. That work normally takes between 18 and 24 months. Like the G36 it was based on, the XM-8 was operated by a short-stroke gas piston and chambered in the same 5.56 round. When the XM-8 rifle is fired, gas pushes on a piston, that piston in turn pushes on another mechanism, which directly cycles the action. In theory, this is more reliable than the M4's direct impingement system. And that's exactly what the Army official trials appear to show. Rumor has it, General Petraeus himself even requested an XM-8 before he deployed to Iraq, because of how impressed he was with these trials. One of the trials I'm referring to here is the now famous Aberdeen Proving Ground tests. The XM-8, Scar Light, HK-416, and your standard M4 were tested under sandstorm simulated conditions.
That's really cool that they're able to test in them conditions. But again, this is another reason why testing takes so long, is because, like, think of the amount of environments this weapon's got to work in for being a standard infantry rifle. You've got jungle, you've got Arctic, you've got desert, you've got urban. Like, there's a lot of different scenarios. If it gets thrown in water, if it gets caked in mud, if it starts to rust. Yeah, a lot of testing.
60,000 rounds were put through each model, with the XM-8 performing the best, with only 127 stoppages. Meanwhile, the M4 did the worst, with 882 stoppages. Granted, there are different theories that might have had to do with some magazine issues, but still, it seemed to suggest just how reliable the XM-8 is. When I tested the XM-8 myself with an average infantryman trial out in Arizona, the first thing that stuck out to me was just how light it was. It was manufactured out of advanced composite polymer materials.
That's pretty cool.
Really cut down on the weight. The PEO Soldier Agency originally wanted it to weigh only 5.9 pounds, which would have been like a 20% reduction from the already lightweight M4.
That's pretty cool.
Walking with the light weapon was like a dream come true. I can see why regular soldiers reportedly loved the XM-8 during trials. You might notice here I've got my right hand off the weapon so I can fish into my cargo pants for a Pop-Tart if I have to. However,
Task and purpose. I fucking love this channel.
this extremely lightweight gave me the impression when I was holding it that if I dropped the thing, it would get dented or it would break if I tried to break it over my knee. But apparently the polymer materials are actually very durable.
That's pretty cool.
Greg from Spartan117GW YouTube channel.
Spartan 117GW. He should be using a weapon like this because it does look very Spartan-esque, doesn't it?
Is a proper firearms expert, and he showed me a run and shoot drill. Doing that drill revealed something really interesting to me. I had some trouble pulling off the tactical reloads. I blame that on being more used to the M4 controls.
This is a little bit different when it comes to the ergonomics, the charging handle. I actually really like this a lot compared to how the M4 runs.
Know where the charging handle is back here on the M4?
Yeah, like this felt natural to me. I don't know, my brain is just wired in a certain way that felt like home. Whereas this, took a lot of getting used to. I really love the slap. To me, it feels weird having your bolt release here.
Excuses aside, retraining on the XM-8 was one of the main concerns that the Army had. When training 1 million people at scale, it can be expensive if the new rifle isn't as intuitive.
I spent like a couple days running this gun.
This makes me interested to watch the video that I'm going to be uploading tomorrow of the SA-80 because you call it what Americans call it, what, the charge handle? Is that what they called it? For making ready the weapon. With the SA-80, you have to go over the other side and pull it, which is crazy if you think about it. I'm used to doing that, so it feels like second nature for me, but it is crazy.
Pretty good at it. Well, I'll use my support hand to basically press it down, but obviously it takes a little bit of time to learn.
But the XM-8 was not without its flaws. This is where we start to get into why it was ultimately never adopted.
Here we go.
The extremely rapid development cycle meant that HK didn't have the time to correct some of the heat buildup issues that were starting to crop up in the G36 that the XM-8 was based on.
This is what we're getting with the new rifle that the US Army is getting right now, is how good it is with the heat and how you can barely feel it. If you watch that video that I uploaded yesterday, the part he was talking about the heat was probably one of the most impressive parts to me, on how he said you could barely feel it after putting through, I think he said like 2 mags and you could barely feel the heat still. Pretty impressive.
Like the G36, the XM-8 was built out of heat-tolerant polymer surrounding the steel parts like the barrel and bolt group. But
Yeah.
heat-tolerant isn't the same thing as heat-proof.
Yeah.
So after extended firings, the polymer holding the barrel in place could soften and warp, shifting the barrel's point of impact in unpredictable ways.
Yeah, that's not
It takes
good.
a lot of rounds in a short time to build up that much heat. One might even argue that you might not realistically fire that much, but the problem was still noticeable during the XM-8's testing. HK had a plan to reinforce the interior of the rifle with a steel skeleton to keep everything in place as the weapon heats up, along with a heat shield for the front handguard, but they just didn't have the time to develop and implement it under the tight deadlines of the project. It also would have added weight to the rifle, eating away one of its key advantages. Okay, so on top of all these alleged performance issues, do you remember all those bureaucratic red tape problems that I mentioned at the beginning of the video? Because they're about to catch up with the XM-8 really quick. When the Infantry Center found out that the XM-8 was being worked on,
Can we just applaud the production value on the videos, the task and purpose too, because they are legitimately so well edited. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
they denied even requesting it or being a part of it. They were pissed off. The Army's right hand wasn't aware of what its left hand was doing. It's true that the weapon
Isn't that the same with everything, though? I don't think that's just the weapon. I think that's the same with everything.
featured a really cool integrated multi-purpose optic by Insight Technology that served as a red dot sight, visible laser, and infrared laser all at once.
That's pretty cool.
Having an integrated optic was a big step up in capability at the time, when weapon optics still weren't standard issue for the US military. However, the integrated optic also had poor battery life in the field. Often the batteries would run out within 500 hours, or like a month straight. And if you've ever deployed, you know how supply sergeants guard those batteries with their lives. A major drawback of the
You don't want that. If you think about within a month, like what happens if you're like out in the middle of nowhere and you get stuck and you've only got this rifle, and then all of a sudden the scope just dies on you. Like, that is not good. That's really bad.
XM-8 was its proprietary PCAP, or Picatinny Combat Attachment Point. These oval-shaped attachment points are much more streamlined than a rail segment. It can be easier to attach or take off optics. It was impressive because it predates similar ideas like the key mod and M-lock by almost a decade. But it ran into the same issues that all of your proprietary systems have.
And especially with modularity, because on the real XM-8, like these keyhole patterns like offered very limited modularity, and the M4 just had so much life left in it.
That's literally what I said at the start of this video, and how the design of it hinders the modification. And as you all know, if the military can't modify and adapt something in the long haul, it is not good.
It couldn't use the full range of accessories already out in the wild.
Yeah.
One of the biggest selling points of the XM-8 was that it could be 4 weapons in one, a whole family of infantry weapons that could be easily converted in the field all by your lonesome. You could swap out the barrel for a short PDW version, add a drum magazine for a light machine gun, or designated long-range marksman variant. However, in reality, it wasn't as easy as it seemed. You still needed a barrel wrench setup to do it, which meant there was no such thing as quick swap outs in the field. Colonel Moran and his colleagues were bold. They genuinely wanted to get past red tape and restrictive bureaucracy so they could deliver a better weapon to the troops to address their...
The thing is, I get why they wanted to do that. Like, they had to fix these issues ASAP, didn't they? Like, the lads were in Afghan, struggling with the weapon they had. They wanted to get it fixed ASAP. And so I understand their desire to do something like that. But obviously, it's not feasible. It's just not, it's not what you should do, really.
concerns. But I think this might be how we learned why many of these boring procedures and regulations were put there in the first place.
Yeah.
They're there to prevent waste and money and time and prevent development of weapons that ultimately no one has a need for.
Yeah.
By circumventing the normal procurement process, it opened a window for American gun manufacturers and their allies in Congress to rightfully point out that the XM-8 had essentially already been pre-selected to replace the M4 without anyone else having a chance to compete.
That's true as well. Like, having multiple companies compete for being that one rifle is so important. I know, we can get into the politics of capitalism or whatever, but one thing it really does do is show innovation. And if you've got multiple of these companies, which have a lot of money, these companies who do want them contracts, they will do anything to get them contracts. They're going to innovate. And if you put 4 or 5 companies up against each other, the best rifle is going to be really, really good. And if you've already pre-selected something, then it just defies all that purpose, doesn't it?
That's not fair card, because it actually goes against ethical and strategic regulations for military procurement. I hear you, ethics and war machines don't exactly go together like PB&J, but I don't know if you know this, but the Army is supposed to buy American first before reaching out overseas to a German company like H&K.
That's
the
also
U.S.
true.
Army is at least supposed to offer a fair chance bid for contracts to American sources. Personally, I think it's fascinating to see how the XM-8 saga directly influenced future firearms procurement with the next generation squad weapon, the XM-7. The XM-7 was careful to make sure everyone was on the same page from the get-go. Companies like SIG from Germany already had an American division set up. Soldier touchpoints and feedback were integrated early on.
So if anything, it's only benefited for the future, hasn't it?
The performance metrics for the XM-7, the firepower and capability, could be argued to be twice as high compared to the M4. Meanwhile, the XM-8 appeared to only offer a small, marginal improvement, firing the same type of round. It was only a little bit better in reliability. And with an estimated cost of $2 billion to replace the M4, it was just tough for Congress to justify it.
$2 billion!
It just wasn't flexible enough, and that's kind of why it ended up kind of being just a part of history, but not really making it in the mainstream.
And
I think Colonel
an iconic part of history. I've seen that weapon so many times in video games and knew nothing about it. Absolutely nothing about it.
Moran and H&K have been trying to avoid a lengthy bidding process by jumping onto a promising concept that only ended up creating more obstacles than they bypassed. Colonel Moran's legacy is interesting. You might be surprised to learn that him and his team are the same officers responsible for the adoption of the infamous UCP camouflage. He reportedly overrode the testing data and directed the adoption of the untested camo pattern. But he was also instrumental in getting every combat soldier an optic for their firearm. This is why, when the Army requested $26 million to acquire 7,000 XM-8 rifles for large-scale combat tests, Congress said, "No way, Jose." And by October 2005, the whole XM-8 saga was officially over.
That's
still
mental,
a really cool
innit?
gun. It's like, gotta check that box.
It's
But worry
iconic.
not, the XM-8 found an unlikely home. They were purchased by the Royal Malaysian Navy Special Forces. And the rifle continues to find action in all of your old Ghost Recon and Battlefield Bad Company servers. All the targets we shot were these really cool self-healing rubber targets from infinitytargets.com, made by Elijah Lawrence. Be sure to check them out. And a huge thank you to Austin Reed. Check him out on Instagram at ARVantage. You're gonna want to look at his work there. I'm your
Yeah, go and check out Task and Purpose as well, because they are phenomenal and do absolutely brilliant videos. This was a relatively new video for them. I think it's a good time for this video to come out, considering that the US military is adopting a new rifle. So it's interesting to see the evolution of how things have been attempted and failed in a way. Great video, full of really good information. I think the rifle's really cool looking. It really is like an iconic rifle. There's a lot of things in the military that are very iconic that just never really worked out, and I think this is one of them. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts. I thought it was a great video. I really enjoyed that, and I'm excited for tomorrow's video. It's Garand Thumb's video on the SA-80. If you are not ready, then be ready. Turn on notifications, and I'll see you tomorrow. Until next time, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.